I think it goes without saying at this point that I have played a lot of bad games on the Nintendo Switch, mostly coming from those asset flippers and scam artists just looking to make a quick buck. But what about those developers who are genuinely trying to show you a good time and not just shaft you up the Aris hole? Well, today we have a game whose notorious reputation precedes it, but is it justified or is it just a little misunderstood? I'm talking, of course, about Vroom in the Night Sky, a game whose critics overwhelmingly dislike it with an average rating of 17 and whose user score sits generally unfavourable at 3.3. But this is apparently the worst rated game on the Switch according to Metacritic. In this video though, I'm going to be playing through it in its entirety, providing you the viewers with my thoughts and observations on it, and hopefully by the end of it answering one simple question: was it actually that bad? I'll then be placing it into an arbitrary tier list I've created, ranging from S rating, they lied to me, all the way down to F rating, I'd rather play with my dad. But without further ado, drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this one and want to see more, and let's get started. So this is the main menu, and the first time you start the game you'll be greeted by a furry called Cochin, who I mistakenly read as Cockchin, but this little fella asks you, are you the first time to play this game? Which already gives you a feel for how poorly Vroom in the Night Sky is translated. If you say yes though, you'll then be taken through a tutorial of sorts, which kind of makes sense if you're able to see past the broken English, and the tutorial stage takes us through the basics, including how to brake and accelerate using the B and A buttons, and teaches us that in order to complete a stage we must find all of the large stars, or Keystars, and then make our way to the magical gate, or exit portal as I like to call it. What it doesn't teach you, however, is how to turn, ascend or descend, although if you played any kind of flight simulator, it's pretty much the same setup with an inverted Y-axis and some insanely sensitive steering, so you'll need to be gentle with this one to save yourself from whipping about all over the place like I did. Whilst playing a level, your character and magical furry Cockchin also rabbit on at one another in the bottom left corner, spouting some random shite like "don't be shy, say small thing," and "the magical gate has opened, give me 5," and it's a nice little touch which you can completely ignore. But after collecting 5 Keystars I was done. I found my way to the magical gate and was then directed to the driving school to learn some of the game's more advanced techniques. Now here I learned how to execute magical braking, which is basically a handbrake turn, how to execute magical dashes by hitting X whilst collecting Stardust, which are these floating white shard things, and how to fire magical missiles, which home in on rival bikers or Stardust. And I realise I'm saying magical a lot here, but this is a magical game, so what did you expect? I also learned with some difficulty how to perform magical trampoline, which involves hitting against the ground, magical collision avoidance by pressing up and X at the right time to avoid objects, and magical turn, which is basically this game's version of drifting, and I couldn't quite work out how to execute this properly at first due to the terrible instructions, but you basically tap brake and then accelerate and have to keep your bike at the right angle to keep it going. There was also magical thrilling, which involves passing close to objects without hitting them, and this was very inconsistent in my experience, but you can combine magical turning and magical thrilling for more Stardust. In all honesty, the controls in the game aren't terrible, they just feel very floaty and oversensitive, and you'll constantly feel like you're performing drifts whenever you turn and not of the magical variety. After playing through the game though, some of the manoeuvres also seem completely pointless, like I literally never had to use the trampoline or dodge once, but all in all they're not too bad once you get used to them. After completing the driving school though, I then headed in to check out the settings menu, where I discovered that you can switch out the accelerate and brake buttons, flip the X and Y axis, and also change the speedometer to miles per hour instead of kilometers, which I of course did immediately, being a Brit and all. And with my setup complete, it was then time to get into the game proper. Now, after taking to the stage select screen, my first taste of the game came in the night sky of the quiet desert, and I selected the start scooter as my mode of transport. Now, graphically, Vroom in the night sky is nothing to write home about, and while its characters and vehicles are all sporting reasonably detailed 3D models, the level terrain and everything else in the game is low poly. In fact, it's so low poly that it may as well be no poly. But the level of detail in them leaves them feeling barren and devoid of either life or feeling, which is somewhat contradictory to the whimsical experience that I was expecting. The sound, on the other hand, is reasonably decent, with some rather generic sound effects which just sound okay, and the music is so happy and upbeat that it actually starts to get on your tits a little, but there's very little else to say from a graphical and audio front. Much like the tutorial though, my objective in this first level was to collect all of the Keystars, and so I set out to do so. There were 10 of them in this level, and there's no time limit in the game, so no pressure to collect them. However, as I'll get onto shortly, the timer at the top of the screen does serve a purpose, as does the Stardust you collect, which are essentially your points and currency in the game. After collecting my third star though, or about 1 minute into the level, my rival appeared, who I presume is called Cutie Magical Girl Shining Star, unless she's talking about us of course, and apparently she's here to steal all of our Stardust. However, I never saw her steal any of it, and she just flies around like an annoying wasp chatting shit down in the bottom right corner. If you want to get rid of her, all you need to do is fire a few missiles at her, or like me, a barrage of missiles, after which she'll just sod off. But I was rather taken aback by her exclamation of "screw you" in such a child-friendly title. Proceeding onwards to collect a few more Stardust though, I headed off to the exit portal to finish out the level, and was rewarded with a large time bonus for completing it so quickly in a not so rapid 3.5 minutes. Level 2 took me to the night sky of a strange town, where I encountered more low poly assets, this time cobbled together to form a sort of cityscape complete with skyscrapers and a bridge, and once again I set out to repeat the same objective. Collect 10 Keystars, try to earn some extra points on the side by collecting Stardust and shooing off my irritating antagonist. I also discovered in this level though that missiles will also lock onto Keystars, and that if you hold your missile button they'll travel further, something that will come in very handy in the near future. And for the first time ever, I also noticed that firing missiles actually costs fuel, seen as the pink points meter next to your speed in the top left, which I discovered later to my detriment, running out of makes you drop to the ground unable to fly until you refuel by heading to the glowing M pad situated somewhere within the level. After finishing out the level, I then decided to take a look at the game's shop, home to a whole host of bikes, scooters and motorcycles, each with varying levels of stats, which include speed, power and handle. These increase in cost from 100,000 Stardust up to a whopping 2 million Stardust. But to my surprise, I'd already amassed over 1.4 million, presumably from completing all of the driving school objectives, and so I decided to splash some cash on a high-end magical racer. Now from here on out, the game became rather stale, no thanks to the fact that I now pretty much had the second best vehicle that money could buy, but also because the objective remained the same throughout the rest of the levels, and although the Keystar count rose in each of them, I blazed my way through the night sky of a factory section with my much faster superbike, tore across the night sky of the ocean with its rippleless waves and ghost ships, and soared through the sky, just the sky, as passenger planes hung in static formations whilst biplanes tumbled and twirled. There was no real challenge presented by any of these levels though, not with the positioning of any of the stars, nor the terrain that I was tasked with navigating. But completing these levels, I noticed that I had 2 unknown levels still yet to unlock, and so headed back to the main menu to investigate. It was here that I found the Memories menu, an achievement list of sorts whose rewards include large sums of Stardust, new bonus vehicle types, and of course the 2 missing levels. However, I soon discovered that in order to unlock these, I was required to purchase a 125cc bike and a 1000cc bike, the former of which I had just enough points to square away, but the latter cost 1.5 million Stardust. It was then that I set about completing the Stardust rewarding achievements, and I actually discovered a refreshing change of pace for the game. You see, these achievements require you to beat the record time of other magical girls, and so it becomes a race against the clock to snag all of the Keystars and make it to the exit portal. While the level of challenge it offers isn't overly demanding, it still requires some planning of routes and swift manoeuvring to shave off those seconds. But I was pleasantly surprised by how much more enjoyable the game became when something as simple as a time limit was introduced, and that missile firing trick that I learned earlier definitely helped when it came to beating the records. Unfortunately, these achievements are limited to the 5 readily available levels, and the unlockable ones only offer the standard gameplay experience. But after completing them, I had still only earned half the points needed to purchase the 1000cc motorbike. This led me to the other achievements, which involved earning over 100,000 Stardust points in a single run of a level. And there are 2 ways you can go about this one. You can either play the game as normal, collecting all of the Stardust and utilising boosts to earn bonuses on them, which unfortunately also means you'll have to refuel several times along the way, or you can do as I did and exploit the shit out of the drifting mechanics, because as long as you maintain the right angle, your bonus Stardust points will continually rise. A side effect to this method is that you might just vomit all over the place, especially if you're prone to motion sickness, and unfortunately the bonus points top out at 99,999, so you can't just hold it forever to earn unlimited points. After completing a couple of these achievements though, I'd earned enough Stardust to purchase my 1000cc superbike and had unlocked the final 2 levels, which turned out to be just as disappointing as the first 5. One being the night sky of the resort mood, where a blood red sky hung over an abandoned town surrounded by wind turbines, and the night sky of chaos, where ships float in the sky and the buildings tumble like toppled dominoes. But after completing these 2, the only thing left for me to do was to grind out another 4 million points to unlock the final bikes, and I decided that I'd rather keep my dinner inside me. So that pretty much sums up the majority of what Vroom in the Night Sky has to offer. And the bonus vehicles unlocked by completing the other achievements include some obscure props to ride, including a broomstick, a magical chair and bench, a magical car and a magical biplane and airliner, though as you might expect, the effort put into making these things rideable is questionable at best. But they still offer some of the best vehicles in the game if you can get over how stupid you look whilst using them. So to sum it all up, Vroom in the Night Sky is a whimsical yet totally underdeveloped indie title, which whilst having a totally acceptable control scheme once you get used to all the sliding, feels ultimately void of any ambition. Its visuals are inconsistent and dull, its unlocks aren't worth unlocking, and its basic gameplay loop has no real charm or challenge to it. To put it bluntly, it's fucking ugly and boring. Although I will have to admit to having at least a little bit of fun completing the time trial achievements, not so much the point gathering ones, which actually made me feel a little nauseous. The real question though here is, was it actually that bad, and does it deserve the reputation that it's earned? Well, to that I have to say both yes and no. It's bad in the sense that it's a bad game with wafer thin mechanics and barely anything in the way of gameplay, and it's regrettable that I had to pay £8 to find that out. And I felt that there could have been much more done to implement the steering mechanics, like some additional challenges to complete, and that the levels themselves could have involved more than just picking up 10 key stars, or at least making them more difficult to collect by possibly adding in more challenging terrain to navigate. But considering the overall premise of the game, I feel like this one was aimed at a much younger audience, and I feel like they would definitely have a fun enough time playing it. It also feels like a game that someone put at least a little bit of effort into. The controls work fine for the most part, and the mechanics are sound, albeit a little dull, and there were no bugs or glitches to speak of. So all in all, it's not a terrible game, It's just not a very good game. The Nintendo Switch released in March 2017 and Vroom released at the start of April 2017, and in all honesty I feel like Vroom in the Night Sky is a solid case of critics jumping on every game within the Nintendo Switch release window and shitting on anything that was subpar, so I feel like a lot of the ratings for the game on Metacritic are left over from a time when there wasn't much to compare it against, which does somewhat skew things and leaves the game with a reputation that, in my opinion, it doesn't rightly deserve. And it's clear to me that those people over on Metacritic have never tasted the fruits of publishers such as Midnight Works & Co, because those are some rotten apples right there that are actually worthy of the title of the worst game on the Nintendo Switch. In order to give this one a fair rating, I feel that more people need to play the games that I've played and reviewed on the channel, because doing so may just put things into perspective with this one. But away with all the talk, and let's see where Vroom in the Night Sky sits on our worst games on the Nintendo Switch tier list. Well, all things considered, it's really not that bad at all, and I think the lowest tiers on this list should be reserved for something extra special. So today I'm going to be placing Vroom in the Night Sky in C tier rank, as mid as your mum. That's it for this one though. So let me know if you agree or disagree with my rating of Vroom in the Night Sky, and leave your own opinions on what you think is the worst Nintendo Switch game of all time down in the comments section below, and I might just give it a look here. But for now, don't forget to drop a like and sub if you enjoyed this one. A special thanks to the patrons of the channel for their ongoing support, and to you the viewers for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.